Hello everybody, and welcome to this poster presentation on investigating the interplay between developers and automation. I'm Omar. Pleasure to meet you. Before I start, I want to thank the people without whom this work in progress would not have been possible. Margaret Ann Story, my supervisor, Neil Ernst, Andy Zeidman, and Elise Paradis. Continuous practices like continuous integration, continuous delivery, and continuous deployment have been on the rise over the past decade. While they started out as an extension of extreme programming, they're probably better known nowadays for advocating the use of automation. There are various levels of automation which I won't get too much into, but for the most part, developers still maintain a strong presence in this largely automated workflow. Developers still make the decisions on whether the test results are adequate, what version of the built software to release, and when to deploy to the user. So what did we want to do? We wanted to figure out how developers and automation interact. For instance, how much of the workflow was automated? How did automation fit into a developer's decision-making process? And more importantly, what impact the context had on all this? Were the practices that were meant to maximize the utility of the automation implemented? If yes, how were they implemented? Were developers seeing the benefits they expected? And so on. We started out by looking at GitHub Projects, as much of the literature does. We examined the closest proxy to practice documentation we could find, namely a project's contribution guidelines. We found that most projects only ever feature automation in its testing capacity, with no mention of continuous practices. So the conclusion here was that we couldn't assume GitHub Projects actively enforced any continuous paradigm, say for using automation such as Travis CI or Jenkins. We decided to move to more focused studies and started working with a few software development organizations. We managed to do two studies. The first looked at how non-functional requirements were being handled in a continuous context, and the second took a much more in-depth look at the continuous practices implemented at these organizations. From the first study, we found that developers would often delegate some NFRs to the tools they were using. NFRs such as scalability and reliability had become a facet of their automated infrastructure, which they could configure if they needed to. From the second study, we came across several findings relating to continuous practices. For instance, the implementation of a particular practice depended heavily on how the team perceived it. Practice priority and its perceived benefit changed how it was implemented across organizations. In addition to perception, there were two more factors: project context and tool constraints. These are discussed at length in their corresponding papers, so we used the findings from all three studies to build an explanatory theory that we could use to interpret the phenomena we are seeing. Why did we build a theory instead of using or extending an existing one? We concluded that what we were observing was a socio-technical system where developers, tools, and processes were all interacting with each other. The issue here is, when we tried to find socio-technical theories that would explain what we were seeing, we couldn't. Most theories in software engineering are borrowed from other domains. Consequently, they tend to be skewed towards one or two elements of a socio-technical system, but not all three. For instance, the theory of cognitive biases focuses on the human aspect. Boundary objects focuses on humans in the system but not the process, and so on. And when we did find theories that addressed all three elements, they were often too high level for the phenomena we were seeing, and usually attempted to interpret the entire software engineering activity. So we built ours inductively from what we observed, which resulted in the ADEPT theory that was featured in this year's ICSI Near track. So where do we go from here? Right now we're doing a literature mapping study using ADEPT as a lens to try and figure out what aspects of the human-centric continuous paradigm have not yet been explored. The next step will be to operationalize these constructs, generate testable hypotheses from ADEPT, and see if they hold. If there's one thing I'd like you to take away from this presentation, it's that based on what we've seen, it isn't enough to just focus on the tool or the practices being implemented. All these constructs interact with each other in this delicate balance based on what their context dictates as an expected benefit. Because the tool on its own is not indicative of the entire workflow. As Bill Gates once said, automation applied to an efficient process will magnify the efficiency, whereas automation applied to an inefficient process will only magnify the inefficiency. Thank you.